Dragons. Scourge of the ancient world. Destroyer of civilisations. Wherever they would go, death and destruction would follow. Before there was Bigfoot, before the Loch Ness Monster, perhaps even before there was Mokele Mbembe, there was the dragon. Dragons. They have been mentioned by every people, in every culture, in every part of the world since the beginning of time. They came in many shapes and forms. In ancient China, they were revered as gods. In Europe, they were feared by all but a few brave knights. But did dragons actually exist? Are these legends and stories that have been passed down from generation to generation for tens of thousands of years just myths? Or are they indicative of a time when gigantic, flying reptilian animals actually existed on Earth? The dragon, at one time, was everywhere. Dragons appeared in paintings. They appeared in stories. They were a part of everyday life for our ancient ancestors. Human sacrifices meant to appease the dragons whom people feared and worshipped were common. Some people were born and raised specifically for that purpose, to one day be sacrificed to the dragon. Dragons have been given several different descriptions over the millennia. They seem to have come in a variety of colours and patterns, and are generally described as being large, reptilian, flying beasts, often with the ability to breathe fire. Some legends state that the dragon has wings which it used to take off and to propel itself through the air. The oldest known image of a Western dragon appears in a hand-painted illustration from the bestiary M.S. Harley 3244, which was produced circa 1260 AD. This dragon has two sets of wings, and its tail is longer than most modern depictions of dragons, but it clearly displays many of the same distinctive features. In the legends of ancient Eastern countries, such as China, the dragon is said to instead be more of a serpentine, snake-like creature that can fly through the air by performing an undulating up and down motion, like how dolphins and whales swim, and without the need for wings. The eastern variations of these legends also mention the dragon's skin having a sparkling, magical quality, and are said to have a shining pearl or jewel embedded in their heads. Is it possible that possession of this supposed shining jewel could have been a hunting technique, similar to the anglerfish? For smaller dragons, this would certainly be an effective method of capturing magpies and other birds attracted to shiny objects. Dragons, being carnivorous, would most likely have made a meal out of human beings if such an opportunity arose. The cult of dragon worship, seen throughout the ages, would likely have come about through primitive peoples performing human sacrifices to appease the dragons. If they offered a human sacrifice to the dragon that lived nearby, it would be satiated and satisfied, meaning that it would not attack their settlement looking for a meal. Harvard University linguist and philologist Michael Witzel recently used a technique called phylogenetic analysis, which usually involves creating branching diagrams to represent the evolutionary history or relationship between different species that have developed from a common ancestor. Using this technique, Witzel discovered that dragon stories and legends go back 40,000 years, further back in time than anyone previously thought. It would seem that for as long as modern humans have been around, we have been aware of the existence of dragons. In these early days of human history, dragons were likely to be a common sight when looking to the skies. The question we need to ask, however, is how exactly did dragons manage to fly? How did they even manage to take off in the first place? Dragons, in our various ancient legends, were said to be enormous creatures. How could an animal so gigantic be able to easily glide through the air without giving it a second thought? The answer is actually rather simple. In 1979, author Peter Dickinson published his book, The Flight of Dragons. He was impressed by how universal dragon legends were, coming from every corner of the globe and from all civilizations, which were completely isolated from each other. Dickinson believed that these stories must be based in reality and not merely the product of myths and fairy tales. The main problem that he had to grapple with, however, was the sheer size that dragons were meant to have been. He estimated, by studying medieval reconstructions, that dragons would weigh around 20,000 pounds when fully grown. To get off the ground, a creature of this size would need to have a wingspan of around 600 feet, about the height of the Seattle Space Needle in Washington State, USA. The easy thing to do would be to dismiss flying creatures of this size as fantasy and nothing more. However, it is in fact a strong possibility that a creature of such an immense size could have existed. Peter Dickinson, in his book The Flight of Dragons, talks about a chance viewing of the Hindenburg crash footage on television. Upon seeing this footage, a thought struck him. He said that the Hindenburg was not just a very big machine that flew, it was a machine that could fly only because it was very big. Dragons could fly because most of their bodies were hollow and filled with lighter than air gas. Dragons needed an enormous body to hold enough gas to provide lift for the total weight of the beast. Dragons did not need enormous wings because they only used them for propulsion and maneuvering. Dragons breathed fire because they had to. It was a necessary part of their specialized mode of flight. Peter Dickinson, in his book The Flight of Dragons, had hit upon a groundbreaking theory for the existence of dragons on Earth thousands of years ago. Being as large as they would need to be hollow and filled with lighter than air gas. They would also need to breathe fire somehow, as it was necessary for their mode of flight. He theorized that dragons were in fact the descendants of large, fast-moving carnivorous dinosaurs like the Tyrannosaurus rex. Like the infamous Mokele Mbembe, which makes its home in the African country of the Congo, the dragon could have been a relative of the dinosaurs from those prehistoric times, a few of which managed to survive the extinction level event that killed most of their kind. Over the ensuing tens of millions of years, the T-Rex could have evolved the ability to fly. This isn't too far from the currently accepted scientific theory of modern-day birds being the descendants of dinosaurs. Along with gaining wings, they would have also developed huge chambered stomachs that they filled with hydrogen gas. The hydrogen would be formed from a mixture of hydrochloric acid in the gut and calcium, which would be gained from the bones of its prey. The hydrogen in the dragon's stomach, once expelled through the mouth and coming into contact with oxygen, would be extremely flammable. This would explain the dragon's most iconic attribute, its fiery breath. To gain lift, the dragon would fill its gas bag stomach. To descend, it would burn it off by breathing it out. The fiery breath could, of course, also be used as a weapon in territorial disputes with other dragons, and as a weapon of destruction against human settlements, should it feel the need to do so. A similar technique can be seen in the modern-day bombardier beetle, which fires boiling jets of chemicals at its enemies, chemicals produced in separate glands in the beetle's body which do not reach such high temperatures until they come into contact with oxygen. If the bombardier beetle has such an ability, then a similar talent could have also been present in other creatures throughout history. Most animals produce stomach acid, many animals produce water, and the majority of animals produce gas. Isn't it possible that a living creature, like the dragon, could biologically produce fire? So with all this in mind, the question that would occur to most people is that if dragons exist, or existed at one point in history, then where are the fossils? Dinosaur fossils have been found, but so far no dragon fossils are known to have been found or exist. To say that dragons didn't exist because no remains have been found would be convenient and easy. However, a much more compelling theory has been put forward. When dragons are alive, their stomachs would have a thick mucus lining that would keep their hydrochloric acid in check and prevent it from eating away at them from the inside. Once the dragon has died, however, the mucus lining would no longer be produced. This would allow the hydrochloric acid to begin eating away at the dragon's carcass, eventually digesting itself. Once the acid has completely eaten away at the dead dragon, there would be no trace left, no bones, and hence no fossils.